Welcome to Sparks and Honey's Daily Culture Briefing. Today we have a very special edition. It's actually a fireside chat with Dr. Sara Naseri, who's seated next to me. Today's conversation is really going to be focused on harnessing menstrual blood, closing the gender bias and gender data gap, and also thinking about female entrepreneurship, which you're obviously the face of. So I would love to get started today by you just giving us a little bit of background about Quinn and how you got started, and maybe talking a little bit about kind of what really inspired you.
Yeah. So I spent 7 years in medical school, and if I had to boil that experience down, it was very much about sort of recognizing a set of symptoms, putting that in a bucket of this is the condition, and then moving on to what is the treatment, the drug, the procedure. Very little time was spent on prevention. At the same time, we were taught that time is the most important prognostic factor in any condition, right? The importance of early detection and catching things early is very important for how things develop. So I always sort of, going through that experience, it was a question mark for me, and why are we not spending more time on early detection and prevention? And I think to some extent the industry wants to be preventative, but it's hard to do, right? How do we get information about our bodies when we're outside the doctor's office? We've seen an explosion really in medical devices that are trying to give us information about our bodies outside the doctor's office, but it's rarely sort of very clinically relevant. So in my mind, I really wanted to sort of figure out how do we make it clinically relevant? How do we make it easy, accessible to understand what's going on with our bodies before symptoms arise? And I knew from medical school also that 70% of all medical decisions are based on lab work. And so blood is sort of the most commonly used bodily fluid for diagnostics and health monitoring. And so the question became, well, how do we get access to that? And then one day it just sort of hit me. Women bleed every month. Why has no one looked at that from a medical sort of what is like a clinical utility point of view? And the first thing you do, you go online, you go on PubMed, you look, what do we know about the diagnostic utility of menstrual blood? What has been published? And I was shocked to find that there was so little information about how this could be helpful and useful. And really, when we started, there was one paper published on the proteomics of menstrual blood, and you go and you sort of say, okay, who were the people looking at that and why? Yeah. And I was surprised to find where that took me, because a little bit later I found myself at the forensic department in New York, where the first group had looked at this and looked at what is the information you can find in menstrual blood versus, for example, a systemic blood draw. And it was basically because there was a murder case where the suspect said the blood on the couch is menstrual blood, it's not systemic blood, and they had to sort of hire this professor who then did the first study, which was published in 2012, so not even that long ago, that looked at what is the sort of different proteins you can find in this bodily fluid. So very little information was out there on the opportunity. And that sort of led me on this journey of let's figure that out. It took me to Stanford, did a lot of research in not just understanding what it is, but also how does different clinically important biomarkers correlate. If I take a menstrual blood sample that comes every month naturally and I compare it to a systemic blood draw or a cervical biopsy even, what is the correlation there? And can we use it to help women get access to early screening? So that is ultimately what Quinn is about. We care about making healthcare accessible. We care about providing women, it's a women's health company, with the opportunity for early detection and screening through this very convenient, non-invasive platform. We call it the QPAD. It's a modified menstrual pad that offers this opportunity, really.
I love that, and I know I jumped right into kind of what is Quinn and how did things get started, but I actually want to kind of backtrack a little bit, and based on kind of some of the things that you were saying right there, I want to give everyone a bit of a kind of background on Dr. Naseri, because it's pretty incredible, and I know in preparation for this today, I was blown away by everything that you've accomplished, even at the early age of 16. So I'm going to read a couple of kind of bullets from your bio, just so everyone can kind of get the sense. But for sure, it's also posted online if you'd like to see some of what you've, I think, accomplished in an already incredible career. You obviously, Quinn is your latest baby, which is obviously focused on using menstrual blood for early health monitoring and early diagnostics for women globally. But you graduated from Aarhus University in Denmark in 2019. But you've also, and you talked a little bit about, obviously, the medical projects that you've done between Yale, Harvard, I know in Kyoto. So you've been all over the globe. But then in 2019, you were invited by the Department of Obstetrics at Stanford University Hospital to conduct clinical research in women's health. And I feel like this is kind of where really, I think, kind of what got you here today. In 2018, the Stanford Cancer Institute selected and funded your project on improving cervical cancer screening, informing the next generation of tools for point-of-care diagnostics in menstrual blood, which obviously, is a direct connection here. You started, and this is really what got me, you started your innovating at just 16 years old and invented a chemical compound that would absorb 99.9% of all UV radiation. You patented and created this natural UV-absorbing compound designed for complete and continuous protection against solar-caused skin cancer. I'm at 16, and as a mother of a 12-year-old, I have to get some tips on how to get her going in the right direction. You became known as the Ozone Girl, which I love. You won many different challenges and awarded incredible prizes, especially from your home country of Denmark. You were a speaker at TEDx in Copenhagen, and in 2013 you were nominated as Denmark's Female Entrepreneur of the Year. Really incredible. I know that in 2012, you were one of the youngest students to ever participate in Singularity University with a full scholarship in their graduate studies program. And I know that the highlight really of today is how Quinn and how everything that you focus on is really about improving, global health and kind of furthering, especially in kind of the women's health field. You talked a little bit about, kind of Quinn and how you got started. How did you see, though, I think, menstrual blood? I mean, we know it's a kind of a taboo topic as really kind of this bigger opportunity in the creation of this. And I would also love if you could, kind of take us through kind of that journey, but then also give us a little bit of a sneak peek of what the product actually looks like.
Absolutely. Maybe I should start just by saying the word Quinn, which is the name of the company, means woman in Danish, because me and my co-founder Soren, we are from Denmark, so that's sort of where it originates. So it's, when you open the Quinn package, right, you'll find, we call it the Q pad, but essentially it's a modified menstrual pad. It's built with cotton and paper, so it's super sort of accessible in that way. As a woman, it looks and feels like any other menstrual pad. You use it like any other menstrual pad. It has this oval printed to really make it easy for a user to know when they've collected enough. You fill the oval, and then you basically pull this small strip out. You throw the pad away, and this is sort of what is collecting the sample of blood. It dries it down, which keeps it stable. You put it in this return sample container. You sort of slide it in, and then you put it in the mail, and then we receive it in the lab, and you get your results within 10 business days.
And I've done it. And actually, it's a very, very simple and intuitive app also. I think to make it very, very simple, I think that's always one of the things, how cumbersome and how hard will it be to get results and to track those things. And I thought the app experience was very, very simple. So
yeah, so we care a lot about the deltas here. It's less about, what is your, let's say, average blood sugar today, but really how is it changing over time. And here we have a very easy way to get that information where you sort of can see over time how are those trends changing, and give you that opportunity to be in the known about those, to be able to really prevent some of these developments as early as possible, right? So that's where the app comes in and kind of shows you over time what your health status is.
Can you talk a little bit about, I think, in actually using the app and seeing, kind of how it works? Can you talk a little bit about what you can glean from the results that you'd get from, kind of going through the process?
Yeah. So the research I did at Stanford was sort of very basic. When we started, it was very much just basic understanding. What is menstrual blood? I think the first question that I was asked was, can you prove that menstrual blood is blood? So we're like, step one, right? And then sort of moving from there, it was about figuring out, well, some of these very important clinical biomarkers, are we able to detect them from menstrual blood reliably, consistently? And so, some examples of that, it could be like a thyroid hormone, that to kind of assess your thyroid health, for patients that do have thyroid conditions that need to go in and monitor that regularly, this would be an easy way for them to do that. Fertility hormone is another one. A lot of women want to be in the known as they think about family planning or not, to be able to have that information and see where that's going and how that's developing. We've looked at average blood sugar, which is important for prediabetes, diabetics, gestational diabetes, inflammation. A lot of women are concerned about anemia, as women are bleeding every month, sort of what that is looking like. And then one of the things that we're really excited about and where we really want to take this is in an application area like cervical cancer, right? A cancer that is entirely preventable. One of those that if we could screen every woman today, cervical cancer would not kill women tomorrow. And so how do we make that accessible? How do we make sure that it's a global problem and it does need a global, easy solution? And how do we build that? And how the current screening, as women know, is you come into the doctor, you get on the table, we use the speculum exam, and we collect a sample from your cervix.
And nobody wants to do that.
It's not I think some women have described it as barbaric, as we sort of have been doing studies in that. We did publish our data on that recently, and we are seeing that the QPAD is able to screen for that in a similar way that a doctor could with that sample. And actually, we are seeing that we're catching more cases early even. So it's a very exciting opportunity. We are continuing to kind of expand on that. We just recently, as we're waiting for our FDA process in the US, we got contacted by a big hospital chain in Southeast Asia and just recently got our FDA approval in Thailand. And we're really excited to be able to provide this solution for women that, in an area where, cervical cancer is the second, highest cause of cancer-related mortality. And we can change that by making screening accessible, right, in areas where there may not be an OBGYN close by.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I had some conversations with, I know, some of our team and some friends in talking about, the kind of the changing nature of how often you need to be screened for cervical cancer, how often, and those regulations, they change quite often. Do you see the Quinn pad as something that you would use for that kind of screening or for other screenings on a regular basis? Is that how you were envisioning that?
Yes. So I think, the guidelines for cervical cancer screening, you're absolutely right, have changed quite a lot. Right now it's every third year. Depending on where in the world, right. It's every year. Some places it really does differ quite a bit around different medical systems and recommendations. I think with something like this, which is why menstrual blood is an interesting bodily fluid, in that it is not just, it is blood at the end of the day, right? And to some extent, it's a unique bodily fluid because it's not just systemic blood. You also have access to endometrial tissue and vaginal fluid. And so the application areas for where this could become a very helpful way for women to get screened for a variety of different things, right? Some of which we've talked about, right? There's a lot of opportunity there, and I honestly think we're just starting to learn how this could be utilized from a clinical point of view. Yeah. And there's still ways to go, really, right? So as a company, we are still sort of doing a lot of research. That's the main sort of activities we're doing. We are learning really kind of what is the extent of the information that we can provide, and continuing to do that because there's a lot of information that truly has not been looked at before.
It's funny, I think everyone that I spoke to in preparation and talking about, kind of what you're doing, I think every single woman that I spoke to said to me, why hasn't this been done before? So I think it's incredible to have you here today, but it really was kind of an eye-opening thing. I think that when people stop and think that you just never considered that. And I think often it comes from that stigma around what your period represents, and that they hadn't really considered that this could be actually something that could be really good and really helpful in them understanding their body better, as opposed to something that's just this annoying thing that you have to deal with on a monthly basis. So.
Yeah, no, I would definitely agree with that. The stigma is a big part of it, right? That it's been regarded as a waste product, something, sort of like a dirty hygiene product, really, right? I think, frankly, when you think about women's health, I think it has been historically overlooked, and there is a sort of a lack of data in general in women's health and women's health conditions, and this is sort of an example of a very big missed opportunity. I think this is the biggest missed opportunity in women's health. It's been right in front of us this entire time, since the beginning of time. It is very accessible. It's every month. It does blow my mind as a woman, as a doctor, that nobody has looked at that.
I think I'm glad that you brought that up, because I really want to talk about, I watched your Makers conference keynote, which I thought was incredible. I watched it many times, and I really was blown away by what you were talking about with the gender data gap. And again, in just kind of preparation and thinking about asking questions and asking people, women in particular, did they even know what I was talking about? And many of them didn't. And so to hear your keynote, it was really, I think, eye-opening, and thinking about, well, what is the data gap? Can you talk a little bit about and get down to basics on what you mean by that, and what it is, and ultimately how you think Quinn can help, and just how I think everyone can get involved in actually changing that?
Yeah, so I think that, which is a good thing. There is awareness about the wage gap. There's awareness about how do we make sure women get access to the same opportunity as men, and these sorts of things. An area that I think is less talked about is the gender data gap in healthcare, the equality and inequity in healthcare for, a big part of this world, right, which is women's health. And so what the gender data gap is, it is the lack of representation and participation for women in medical research. And as we think about how we draw conclusions about, why different conditions exist, what treatments to utilize, what is even normal, right? When women are not included in these research trials, the conclusions we arrive at are biased towards male biology. And so one example, is in chronic pain. And, women, the majority of chronic pain patients are women, but when you look at how many women are included in clinical trials and research for chronic pain, it's 20%. So when we think about conditions that are predominantly women issues, they're studied on male biology, and that is a dangerous bias. And I think especially now, where healthcare is going in the direction of big data, AI, pattern recognition, it is even more important, and I would even say urgent now, that data set that we are feeding those AIs is representative of female biology. So the gender data gap really is that bias. Women weren't included by law, were not, until 1993, right? And still today, there is a lack of participation and representation in this. So I think, it's so important that we as women and people with female biology participate in research. If we're not represented in research, the conclusions are not sort of including that biology. And it's about time that changes. And I think one of the things we hope to do, not just for women in general, but also women that may be less likely to participate because of lack of access. Even in this country, there's a lot of sort of more remote locations where you may not have access to a university hospital. How do you get access to those women and make sure that they are there? And you have to make it accessible, convenient. There is a lot of data on women of color potentially feeling even overlooked by the medical community. Well, this is a way for them to take power in their own hands and be screened from the comfort of their own home, participate in research, and be represented in that data and in those trials. So that's what's so exciting about this, is that this is really an opportunity for women to be represented in this very non-invasive and convenient way. And that's sort of what we hope to do with Quinn, is sort of not just using this because it gives you access to health, your own health information, but truly you do this because you are excited about us collectively enhancing women's health, and maybe for even this and also the next generation, that we can close the gender data gap, that we can start to really understand how to screen for conditions that are preventable, that we today have no way to screen for, and that's sort of what I find very exciting about this very simple product.
Yeah. I think you mentioned your approval in Thailand. Can you talk a little bit about, there were a lot of questions about, there's obviously differences in terms of the the concept of menstruation in the United States versus other countries. And, with that approval, I'm sure comes different opportunities and challenges. And I just would love for you to talk a little bit about that particular market, your hopes in terms of approval beyond that, and ultimately what you see for the future of the company.
Yeah. So we, as we are sort of in an FDA approval process here in the U.S., we were actually contacted by the biggest hospital chain in Thailand, because they were they basically came to us and said, we had published some of our data, right? We do that a lot. We do publish, in review journals for people who learn from the findings that we are seeing in this very new field. And they reached out to us because cervical cancer is such a big issue there. And in particular, in this region, women are perhaps more reluctant to, for religious reasons, culturally, less reluctant to go in and, undress to sort of get that examination done. So the idea of giving them the opportunity to do that at the comfort of their own home was something that the clinicians and this hospital in particular, were very excited about. And so for us, the QPAD, we hope this transcends, color, race, geography, really. It's a global problem. Menstruation is a global opportunity. So for us, that was a no-brainer in many ways to say, look, if we can make a difference there, we absolutely have to do that. And so with them, we started the process of the FDA approval in the region and got that approval a couple of weeks ago. So we're very excited about being able to provide this non-invasive screening for women in that region as a starter.
Amazing. I would love, you've clearly since 16 have been involved in the health space. So, I would love for you to talk a little bit about what you've seen specifically, I think, in women's health. I mean, we spend a lot of time at Sparks and Honey thinking about, health, in general, but then very specifically, I think, women's health. But I would love your perspective on where you see, especially given what you're doing, where you see the market going, and what you've seen change over even the past couple of years as you've been in development of the product, because there for sure have been some changes, but I would love to see we talk about the future all the time. What do you see as the future of women's health?
Yeah, when we started the company, there wasn't as much focus in femtech. Mm-hmm. I think what we've seen in the last 5 years is really an amazing development in the femtech space, mm-hmm. and companies coming out with various solutions for women, which is amazing to see. I think when you think about feminine hygiene, truly in the last 100 years, the only innovation that we've seen is on size, absorbency. It was amazing when they start, like the perfume in the pad, right? That's sort of the level of innovation we've seen. And I think that's a little sad, right? And so we're excited to say, look, there's more to that. It's not about hygiene, it's about health. But there hasn't been a lot of innovation in that particular field for women. But no, I think in general, femtech, I think it is an exciting time. There's a lot of movement. There's a lot of, I would say, excitement around it. It's great to see. It really is.
Yeah. I would love for you to maybe talk a little bit about, I know there were a lot of questions about you as a female entrepreneur, and I was just reading even a TechCrunch article that came out just a couple of days ago about investment in the space, and you touched on it a bit in terms of how much excitement there is, and how even despite some other people pulling back in different areas, that femtech is one that definitely was growing. I think grew by at least 5 or 6%. They said year over year, which is pretty incredible. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about some of the things that I think are whether there are opportunities or challenges of you being a female entrepreneur, especially in this space. I have to imagine there's been some roadblocks in the way as you've gone, or maybe not.
Yeah, I think there's always challenges, right? We've certainly had challenges talking about, not just being a woman leading this effort, but also we're talking about a very women-specific issue, menstrual blood. I think not just in the investment space, but sort of even in academia, we've seen sort of a stigma and a taboo and a need for like the sort of a need for us to really prove out the data there, right? But you push through that, and you move on, and you find the people that are aligned. And we've been very lucky, to work with institutions like Stanford Medical School on a lot of the science and the research and validation that we've done, and to be able to publish with them, and to say, look, it's not really about necessarily opinion here. It's about data. Mm-hmm. It's about the science, right? And it's about looking at the facts. So there has been challenges in that, but I always just kind of want to bring it back to, at the end of the day, what does the data show? Is this something that can help patients? And if those two things are sort of in place, then frankly, that you think it's gross is a little bit irrelevant here, right? But that is a sort of a thing that we're working through, and I think we'll see that change, I think, over time. I think the topic of menstrual blood, the next generation in particular, are less ashamed. They talk about it. They are empowered. It's a different generation. So I think there's going to be a day where hopefully the next generation won't feel, they'll feel empowered by this kind of opportunity that is so really amazing, this window into the health that women have in particular, right? I think, of course, there is, in the investment space, right, you got to sort of find the investors that look at the opportunity. I think, when you said like women's health is still growing, I absolutely agree with you, because, women are a big part of the world. It's a big market. And that's something that, we've certainly heard what about men? And, it's only half of the world. And we're sort of, it's a big market. So I'm not surprised that, that it is growing despite some of the challenges that are in the market right now. And it's really just about continuing to push forward. And that's sort of what we are doing on our team and on our end, is you just kind of push forward, right?
Yeah. We were actually, just as we were, getting set up here today, we were talking even with some of the crew here, which I loved, about, kind of the changing landscape of even kind of a younger generation, and talking about, kind of a 13-year-old girl. And I would love, it was just inspiring, because I really think, kind of in line with what you're talking about, not only is the space changing, but the conversation is changing. Can you talk a little bit about I think everyone has their own view of what the stigma of kind of menstruation is, or your period, and everyone, I feel like, has their story of when someone handed them a pad or a tampon, and what do I do with this, or how does this work? And I'm just kind of curious how you think, you're leading a brand that's leading the charge, and clearly there's nothing out there that's like this. And I'm just wondering how you think about kind of advocacy and education in the space, and being a champion, I think, for especially a younger generation to really, there's power in your period, to own, this, and to think about it more as kind of something that stands for kind of female empowerment, and how they can, own that, as opposed to being ashamed of it. And I'm just kind of wondering how you think about that, and how, and the platform that you've developed here, that can really be, I think that can probably be a really great education space for many people.
Yes, I think education is a big part of it, right? I think for women, but honestly, for the world, for clinicians to kind of educate them on why this, like the data, it didn't exist when we started. There was no data on the utility there. So education is a big part of that, and it's, in that, important that there are platforms like Sparks and Honey that allow for that conversation, right? Which is also can be a challenge, has been a challenge, right? Like even being able to talk about it,
right?
Be okay with us saying menstrual blood, right? So that's a big part of what we're doing, and we'll have to succeed with, is the education part, and making exactly what you said, that this is an empowering thing. It's about choice, right? You get the opportunity to get your health information. you don't have to ask for permission. This comes whether or not you want it, sort of thing. You're having a period anyways. And utilizing that to be in the known about your health is empowering. You know, I think, as I said, I do think that the next generation are empowered in a different way. However, there is still a long ways to go, especially globally, right? Mm-hmm. But also here. You know, I'm sure every woman sort of can remember, like, if you were on your period and how, you know, you would hide your, it's sort of like,
Totally.
It's not a thing you talk about. It's not a thing, you know, that you're necessarily, there's a little bit of shame and stigma around that still today. So there's still a long ways to go, and I think the conversation is where we start. The data is going to lead that, right? To make sure that we are putting forward where the clinical utility really is there. So that it takes time. We can't do it alone. It's going to have to be a collaboration where, you know, women and men and organizations and institutions and clinicians and the industry really helps put the funding and the resources into understanding that opportunity, right? It is, and it does. I'm with you on the why has it not been done before, but it hasn't. So there is just a lot of work still to be done, which will take participation, certainly.
Do you find a lot of camaraderie in the space in terms of women's health? I mean, they may not be doing exactly what you're doing, but others around you that are really kind of helping lift you up. And I know just a couple of weeks ago we had a discussion around actually menopause, and another CEO that's running a menopause-focused organization, and she had very similar things to say about obviously the data gap and just obviously, but the amount of energy behind what she's doing, but she also had talked about there's a lot of people in her space that, you know, they get together and they do. I'm just wondering if you find the same thing, given what you're doing, and just, you know, because it's unique in this way.
Yeah, I do think there is a lot of sort of camaraderie there. I think a lot of this potentially similar challenges, right? Which is great to see. Yeah, because again, we can't do it alone, right? We're going to need to kind of support each other and kind of help propel something like this forward that potentially has more challenges with the stigma and taboos that are surrounding women's health, and the really kind of, you know, we're behind, right? So I would say there is a lot of support in that way, and that's both from women but also men, right? You sort of need both. So yeah, I do think that's an important part of it, and I think it's great to see that the women are coming together in that way and sort of supporting each other, and also participating. Like we see a lot of, you know, they participate in our research and we can participate in their research. You know, for us, we talk to a lot of women, we've interviewed a lot of women, how we present results, how do women want to, at the end of the day, utilize this product, why does it matter to them, how's it useful, and all that feedback is so important. And you know, we found that women are very eager to provide that feedback, which is super, super helpful and ultimately helps make this solution even better, right? So yes, I do think that there is a lot of support in that way, which we're very thankful for, of course.
Can you? We obviously, you opened up the product. We talked about how it all works. Can you talk a little bit about what? I mean, everyone's sitting here, and especially from a U.S. perspective, different than obviously, you know, you're kind of rolling out in Thailand. How they can get involved, what they can do, how they can, because you can go to quinn.com. Can you talk a little bit about how they can get involved right now?
Absolutely. So right now, the way to get involved, so, you know, we have a wait list, which really kind of gives information about what we're doing, how you can get involved. And one of the biggest things is to participate in research, right? As we are providing that data set and we are going through regulatory bodies, which we are, right, we make sure that as many women as possible are represented in that data. So we are running multiple different clinical trials, both on, you know, basic relevant clinical biomarkers that you find in blood. Cervical cancer is another one, and our FDA trials, right? So I think the main thing is get involved in that research. It is important that I mean, as much representation, as much diversity we can get, the better that those conclusions and the more representative they will be. So on our website, yes, we'd love for everyone to sign up on the wait list and get involved in that way at this point in time.
I love that. I was going to ask you, obviously it's January, you've already touched on this, and it's, I think, the last day of the month. So,
Yep.
but it's Cervical Cancer Awareness Month. And I wanted you, I mean, you obviously touched on that. You've touched on kind of the concept of the pap smear potentially going away, which would be incredible, and this being kind of a, something in its place, and from a continuous, looking at things from a continuous standpoint. Can you talk about, because I know you, kind of in preparing for this, you have, cervical cancer is obviously a huge focus, but there's a lot of other things that you're hoping to tackle. Can you talk a little bit about what, I mean, it's Cervical Cancer Awareness Month, let's talk about that, but let's talk about some of those other things that you are really focused on as well. I would love that.
Absolutely. So I think cervical cancer is an interesting one because it is one of the few cancers that we do screen for population-wide. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of cancers that obviously exist that we don't screen for, and we sort of wait, if you get symptoms, you come in and we look for these things, but there's a few cancers that we sort of as a society have decided this is too important, prevalent, expensive to some extent, I think is some of the reasons why that we have to screen every single one, mm-hmm. regardless of whether you have symptoms or not, we're going to screen you, to some extent, regardless of whether you've had the vaccine. Of course, that's something that is available and amazing, but it doesn't really matter. We still screen you because that is just how important it is, right? And so for us to be able to say, the virus that causes the cancer, which is what we look for, to be able to detect that in the QPAD is just it's an amazing opportunity for accessibility. Reaching women that may not be seen by a doctor or who feel uncomfortable with the status quo, to be able to kind of do that at the comfort of their own home. And we sort of, with the QPAD, we're screening for all the strains that are associated with cancer, and we're able to do that, very well. So right now we have a nationwide trial ongoing. Get involved.
Get involved.
Which we are wrapping up in the next probably quarter or so, and we're excited to kind of bring that to the next step in the regulatory process. We have sort of as a company safety before scale, and so it's important for us that we look at every aspect. We are sort of going through the FDA approval process, and that's a choice we've made. Because we think, frankly, women deserve that once we put a product out there, we are absolutely sure that this is where it needs to be. And so for cervical cancer, it is an important one, right? Because unlike fertility screening, which we can do, thyroid screening, diabetes, all these other things that we have validated and sort of have been fully validated clinically, this is one where, the consequence of not getting screened, is cancer. It's ultimately potentially, losing your life. So we do a lot of research in that region, and I think the Thailand application is also interesting because it gives us more diversity, and that's something we care about to make sure that it's global at the end of the day, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Can you, when we talk about the different types of data that you're looking at, I'd love to talk a little bit about, just kind of your thoughts, or even kind of future looking, how this data would be connected to. We talk a lot about wearables and the interconnection. So, for instance, you get the your results back, and thinking about how you'd communicate something like that to your doctor, how ultimately, kind of future view, it would connect to kind of this larger healthcare system. How do you think about that? Because clearly, we've definitely spent a lot of time talking here at Sparks and Honey about disparate pieces of health data and how those might come together as you start to think about a more holistic healthcare.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of curious about your opinion on that.
I think the word holistic, is the key word. Mm-hmm. And I think what would be the dream and the vision for women's health is that it is a holistic approach, right? And that's sort of where the connectiveness of these various data sets are really powerful. So absolutely do I see a world in which we would be connecting to these various data sets. Yes, if it is, for us, if it does promote enhancing women's health, early detection and prevention, we would be looking into connecting with that. In the same way, the kind of data that we are collecting here is clinical, right? And so we definitely, the opportunity for women to share that with their doctor is something that I think will be important, right? So yes, absolutely, we do believe in connecting these data sets when it comes to sort of the more holistic approach to our health, right? Which I think you hit it spot on, is the right approach. At this moment in time, we are not connecting to various data sets, but it's something that we would be looking into in the future without a doubt.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that pops up a lot. And there aren't a ton of great solutions in the market right now, but I definitely know that's where, obviously where things are going, especially as you think about as a woman being able to take control over, kind of, your full body, your full health. And this obviously makes it very easy.
Yeah.
I know we have a little bit of time left, and I know there were a lot of questions from our team members, and I don't know who's manning the chat, but there's already hands up. I'd love to open it up to the floor and have this be a bit more of a holistic conversation with our audience here, which we've got a full house. Saif, I already saw your hand up.
Well, first of all, thank you for this talk, Doctor. This was fantastic. I'm really happy for the success and wish you success. One of the things I'm noting is that you're offering an accelerated pathway that maybe skips the phlebotomist and skips other parts of the healthcare landscape. Are there cases where you've gotten unfair pushback, right? Because now you're disrupting an existing order, or maybe where you're held to higher standards than the current system.
Yes, I think, I guess where we sort of see this solution live is not replacing doctors, but more a support, right? So as you go to your doctor and you have high cholesterol, you have, let's say, low vitamin D, and you're told, I'll see you in 6 months or a year. In the meantime, don't eat red meat, go for a walk 30 minutes every day, and you're sort of left on your own. And the way we see the Quinn platform support you in that process is really sort of taking care of you outside the doctor's office. Being held to a higher standard, I think, yes, we don't mind that. Frankly, I think that is okay to be when we're dealing with healthcare. But it is. I definitely want to be clear that we're not sort of replacing the doctors. It's a support, and it's an aid for doctors to be able to provide care, especially to the ones that don't get care today, right? So did that answer your question?
Yeah. I was curious about the phlebotomist specifically. I could see the doctor being happy.
Yeah, I think the idea of at-home testing, was a trend that was coming. We've seen it with, even something like colon cancer, where you have the Cologuard, that is a product that, does colon cancer screening at home. It's a way for the healthcare system to be efficient about the doctor's time. And we sort of fit into that trend a little bit. I also think, talking about the future, right, COVID did change that perception quite a bit. The idea of us getting screened from the comfort of our home, the idea of, to some extent, understanding that there are risks going into the hospital, especially during the pandemic, and really needing solutions that could allow even your doctor to get information about what's going on with your health, even when it comes to chronic patients that weren't coming in during COVID, and making sure that their health is developing in the right direction. We've also seen a lot of telehealth solutions where, for that to work, it is very hard to provide care without data, right? As much as you can, take an anamnesis and you can sort of, what are you experiencing, your symptoms? At the end of the day, you need to understand the data, what's going on inside of your body, right? So this is a solution that fits into that trend in the sense that you can get screened and get the data and then tap into the telehealth opportunities that I think is certainly a trend we've seen, and I think will continue to be present in the system. Will we be disrupting certain medical professionals in that way? Yes, absolutely. We are on a path to improve things, and as we do that, it is changing the status quo, and there is a level of we have to be okay with that, right? At the end of the day, it's about choice, and it is about a woman's choice in this particular case to figure out here are my options, right? What do I want? And for some women, going into the phlebotomist or even going in and getting a pap smear is going to be the preferred choice. But not giving them the option to do something that is accessible is not okay, right? And so it is really about choice. And at the end of the day, it should be the patient's choice, what they want to do.
I think it'll be interesting to have someone go or being asked by their doctor to get blood drawn and them saying, no, I really actually just want to, subscribe to Quinn or whatever it might be. I mean, that would be incredible. It's going to it changes the entire conversation, and they show up and they say, no, this is how I want to go about my business. So
yeah,
that'll coming soon. Yeah. Are there questions? Go ahead.
Is the goal for the product to be more of a 23andMe style direct-to-consumer product, or something that would fit within the existing diagnostic part of the healthcare economy?
Yeah, I think for it to be successful, I think it has to fit into the existing healthcare system, and it has to be, to some extent, back to your question around integrating the data, it has to be integrated to some extent, right? I think that there is a movement to some extent when you think about the patient we're seeing today versus the patient 10 years ago even, I mean, you call them patients, but at the end of the day, it is a consumer, it is a human, and that person is more educated today than they were 10 years ago. You're seeing people that they come in, they've Googled their symptoms, they kind of know what they want. They're like, here, this is what I'm experiencing, here are the 3 things that I think is wrong with me, and this is what I want. Put your signature down kind of thing. It's a very different consult, right? So I think again, I bring it back to choice. For some women to be able to get the information about their health, not ask for permission, right, is an option that we would love to give them, and that sort of fits into the D2C, right? But having said that, I think still collaborating with clinicians, fitting into the existing medical healthcare system, and supporting that to improve that is going to be part of the strategy as we kind of go to market and think about rolling out a solution like this.
Danny?
Thank you for being here. There are so many different things that I was trying to have questions about, but really thinking about, you talk about choice a lot in this country that is very politicized, and as we think about data collection here, what are the things that you're thinking about as you're starting to suss out partners surrounding the politicization of data collection?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. In this time, especially, there is a civil rights movement almost, right, in terms of agency over a woman's body. Where I'm from in Denmark, this is not a concern. So I think you're absolutely right. This is a fight that is worth fighting for women, especially with the things that are going on right now. When we think about data collection, anything that from our platform side, point of view, we started as a research organization. We are a research organization, and so everything that we do comes down to consent, right? As you utilize a product like this, you are consenting to that. And the moment that you choose not to, you are able to delete that data, right? A big part of what we do is also the sort of, because of the gender data gap, and I mean, frankly, the lack of focus on women's health in particular, and the gender data gap that I just mentioned, and we do want to enhance women's health, and so as we collect information and this data in these trials, we are we are sort of aggregating that data. We are what we call is de-identifying that data, which is removing your personal information, your name, and these sorts of things completely away from the data set. And we are publishing that, right? Because ultimately, that's what this company is about. But as far as the data collection and how we think about sort of ownership of that, it is very basic, down to consent, and that you have the choice to participate. You certainly have the choice to delete your data when you want. Okay, so that's sort of how we look at that.
Yeah, I was thinking more of the people who want to use this are going to consent it and feel good about it. But thinking about the fact that we have the certain people in this country who are not allowing us to have certain books in libraries or to have drag queens read stories to children. Just thinking about the politicization of this product as it comes to market, knowing that there may be some ideological pushback because there's going to be a story that might be spun around they're trying to get your data so that they can, do something terrible about women's bodies. So wondering kind of more around the cultural barriers that you're seeing from market to market as you start to push this out.
Absolutely. I think it's kind of coming back to like the education part,
Right.
and being incredibly transparent about something like our data policies, making it very clear to women kind of what is going to happen with this data and why are we collecting that data. I think without a doubt there's going to be pushback. I'm not expecting this to be easy. I think we've seen in our entire journey how, political views do impact healthcare, which is a scary thing, right? It really should not be. It should be two completely separate things, yet it's not, as we've seen, in particular in the late, as of recent, right? So I think we are going to be part of that movement in saying this is not about, this is about healthcare, it's about accessibility, and, it is, but I hear you on that. How do you cross barriers that are politically led, where we are taking away agency over women's bodies or misinforming women about healthcare, right? And we are going to do our very best to make sure that we are putting out data and that we are sort of keeping in mind women's right to choice and agency.
Love that.
So thank you. It's been really wonderful to hear you and your whole experience. You said that you just got approval in another country. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Have you already started the process here in the United States? Because I know it's pretty long and tedious. And what's your forecast? How long are you expecting it to get approval? And with that answer would be, is there anything else that we can do other than join the wait list? Are there subgroups that you're really looking for? You were talking about Black or Hispanic. Like, are there people that you're really looking to help and aggregate that data so that we could also internally push? You have different kinds of people here. I don't know what everybody's background is. But as a community, especially here in the States, regardless of what's happening in the news or what the hell is happening, but we could help in our own little worlds to start creating a conversation of this is coming in case you don't know, or things like that.
Yeah, for the first question in terms of what the process is in the country, yes, we've started that process and have been in that process for quite a while. The pandemic did slow down, medical innovation to some extent for quite a while because the agency was so, to some extent, resources were sort of very much focused on that for good reasons. And so, I think that the good news is that, it seems to be moving along at this point in time, which we're really excited about. And we are working as hard as we can to get this out, of course, but also we are a little bit under sort of the FDA timeline. And as you said, in this country in particular, very slow. As to how you can get involved, I think I honestly really appreciate that question. And I think with the wait list, the goal really is to kind of how we can get women involved, for women who are interested, right? So I would love for women to sign up. We are releasing information sort of as we go, and there'll be opportunities whether it's participating in research or to join a conversation, we'd love for women to participate in that. And frankly, any other ideas for how we can politically or what it may be, culturally, change that conversation and bring education forward on something that is so, really just so natural, a women's period, then we would be super happy to participate and kind of like collaborate, I should say. Yeah.
Monitoring women's health, I mean, it's not something that you do normally. There are gaps. I go to the doctor and you get every 6 months, shit, in 6 months anything can happen. So I think this is really, really amazing.
Thank you. Couldn't agree more.
Molly, I saw you had a question.
Oh, no, Danny asked a very similar question to me, so I'm good.
Got it. Any other questions? Okay, go ahead.
I was a bit curious, and thank you very much for coming in, because I was very curious about how to move the conversation beyond women. And I'm talking from personal example because it's not a topic, even though I've been married for a long period of time, that I normally engage in. But as we were sitting here, I actually texted my wife about the website. Next thing she texts me back is, hey, I've signed up, right? And
Thank you for doing that.
while I was talking about this, what came to my mind was that I had never thought about this before, that I actually have a teenage special needs daughter. There's no way she's going to go and do a gynae examination, so this comes into place. I'm very interested how to be able to help, or what ideas would come out to move the conversation a bit beyond women.
Yep.
I think, just from personal example that I'm sharing, is it may be used, I'll be interested in.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more, and actually what you bring up there is an important patient group. For something like cervical cancer screening even, I remember one of the most moving, I would say, experiences to some extent that I remember from sort of some of my clinical rotation. It was actually a cervical cancer screening of a woman that was disabled and, also had some mental health issues. And we actually had to, anesthesia was a big part of it. Like, it was hard, there was like barriers there. And so I think that's another area where like this woman is probably wearing a menstrual pad anyways. Why not make it easy? So yes, I think for those patient groups, this is very important, and a part of how do we make it accessible is certainly including those women, right? In terms of how we move the conversation forward, I think it is a little bit on us to gather, all of us, right, to figure out how do we normalize this conversation. And I think even having a platform like I kind of mentioned with Sparks and Honey that allows for that to happen is not something that we've seen too often. I think not just like from a PR perspective, but there is a little bit like, ooh, we don't want to talk about menstrual blood. Our viewers are not gonna like that, right? Well, that's just not good enough, right? It's just not good enough. This is about health, and it is about it's important topics. We can't just shy away from that, and it's gonna take a village to kind of push that forward. I would love to hear from anyone in terms of good ideas for how we can propel that, good platforms for us to be able to have that conversation and join the wait list.
I love that. It happened right here while we're doing this. Do you have a question?
I just wanted to say that thank you for asking the question about what actually menstrual blood can do for everybody. I think it's just something that I wish more people existed to be able to ask unconventional questions that people aren't thinking of, because it's going to take a lot of, give us a lot of progress in the long run. I think the only question that I had in terms of the actual screenings is we're talking about cervical cancer, but you also mentioned the ability to be able to screen for other conditions as such. In terms of how a woman, once they receive this, do you elect for the types of screenings that you're interested in, or is it just does it run a panel of everything?
Yeah, we've asked women about how they would want this, and I have to be honest with you that I think for it to really work, it has to be personalized. Depending on your health goals, like health concerns, family history, it will be different what you want to look at, right? when we talk to women with diabetes, it's very clear. I want my hemoglobin A1C. I want to know what that looks like. I don't want to wait 3 months to figure out, or 4 or 5 months or 6 months to figure out whether I was on the right track with that, right? We talk to women with thyroid. It's a different story. And to some extent, even I think, depending on age groups, there's different interests, right? In terms of what you want to monitor. Fertility is relevant for a certain age group where there's a high interest. I want to know. I want to know kind of that clock that we sort of metaphorically talk about that's ticking, yet is ticking with very different speed for all of us, and we don't know anything about when and how. And
I'm assuming that's also useful for menopause, it's in terms of gauging, like, when.
Yeah, absolutely. So the predictability of that, as I'm going through that time period, I think you mentioned as well that was a topic here even not too long ago. As you go through that and all of the things that change in your body, then to be in the known, like, it's okay, that this is where I am, and it's, that's what's happening. It's almost about being in the known about why I'm feeling the things that I'm feeling, and having that data, I think is comforting. So to answer your question, from the assays that we validated, the clinically relevant biomarkers that we validated, that we continue to validate, it is going to be, and I say it's different what women want, and it's going to be about choice, but there is also a big group of women who will come and say, you know what, here's, this is my health goals, this is my concerns, this is my age, put together a screening program for me. And that's, there's a lot of women who will ask about that too. Like, I want to know that I'm okay. What are the things that I should be screening for in this time of my life? And where we collaborate with clinicians, in some of these big university hospitals to figure out, well, what is important for us to look at? You think about women's health, and it's a very fragmented space. There is, when we say fertility screening, man, you look at what's out there, and it's the Wild West in terms of what we associate that with, and how do we make sure that we're not screening for things just for the sake of it. We make sure that it is relevant and that the data is, actionable to some extent. I'm not sure I'm answering your question.
You are. I think the ability to be able to, just as you mentioned, create or advise on what you should be screening for based on your health goals and where you are in your life, I think is amazing. Because I think if everybody had the ability to just go in and say, tell me what should I be worried about in general? What don't I know? And that this gives you that ability, or at least a diagnostic, to be able to have a conversation with your doctor, later on, to be able to dig a little bit deeper into the things that are sort of surfacing in all of this. I think it's amazing.
Yeah, we've even in some of we did a big trial on diabetics, and when we do that, we look at both healthy women who've been diagnosed, maybe who are pre-diabetics, like gestational diabetes, 20% of all pregnancies. It's a real, and we have seen examples of women that sort of came into the clinic in the group of I'm healthy, and where we saw that, well, the biomarker we look for this particular one is this. It's called hemoglobin A1C. Your average blood sugar was elevated, and over time continued to be elevated. And for a woman to know that early, and this is just one example, right, for diabetes, and to be able to, this is a condition that is reversible if you catch it early, and the very sort of consequences of not catching it early, right? I think that is really what this is about. It's about you are leaving information in the trash every month. Why not use it? Why not get that insight, right? PCOS is another big one that, we think 10% of women have PCOS. It affects, I think it's mostly talked about in terms of fertility, but the importance of knowing whether or not you're interested in fertility is beyond that. It is about the risk of cardiovascular disease, honestly, even the risk of you developing diabetes. And there are very specific things you can do if you have PCOS, and if you know that you have PCOS, that you can do to prevent those things, right? And so it's really sort of about that kind of screening and taking care of our bodies and being in the known about it. healthcare, it's our health at the end of the day, right?
Well, I know we're at time. This has been such an amazing time together, and the questions were incredible. I feel like I'm leaving super inspired by hearing everybody out here. I mean, your question was just really unbelievable. I think we're leaving believers here. And I think more than anything, what I've taken away from this is really just the power to own your own data and to be able to make it really frictionless, to be able to get access to your healthcare information and what you're doing and facilitating that, and thinking about the kind of how that, what the implications are for women's health, I think is really incredible. So thank you so much for being here today. Really, really an honor. And so you're welcome. You're welcome. Please come again. Please come again. I'm sure there are more questions that will pop up after this, and a lot of other, a lot of other reasons to chat for sure. So I want to thank everybody here for coming today and participating, and thank everybody in our virtual audience for participating as well. If you'd like more information on Quinn, I'm sure it's in the chat, but you can go to quinn.com. And for everyone else, I would love to see you again tomorrow. And so until then, consider yourself briefed.